This is Dan.
And this is Mike from Gear Diary.
And this is attempt number 3 to do this video podcast thingy. We need some sort of a name for it, Mike. If we do this again, we're going to have to come up with something.
That's right.
Maybe we'll run a contest. But anyway, so we are here to talk about the
Google Nexus 7.
And when we tried to do this the other day, I went like this at that point because I didn't have mine, but I now have one because Alana went down to Jersey. We're up here in Pennsylvania, and she picked up mine. So I'm a very experienced Nexus 7 user. I've had it for 12 hours.
Well, I know you've already used some things that I have never tried.
Like the voice recognition, but we'll get to that. You've been using it for almost a week. You got it the first day that it arrived.
4 or 5 days.
And what's the balance between it and the iPad so far for you as far as use?
Well, after the first day, I put the iPad away and have only been using this as part of my Nexus challenge.
So only the Nexus 7. The iPad is feeling lonely. It's turned off. It's getting excellent battery life right now. And
the only thing I am using is music. Like hooked into music production.
Gotcha, because that you've got a lot of experience with, and you've got the apps, and to try to start doing it on the Nexus 7 would be a whole lot to try.
Also, the Android doesn't really support that.
There you go. So one limitation. So what have you learned so far?
I've learned that I am never going to go to a 7-inch tablet permanently.
Period. Whether it's Android,
including
iOS,
iPad
anything.
Mini. Yeah.
Really? How come?
Well, the big thing is just the screen size. So if I go into anything, well, the mini keyboard just doesn't work for me very well.
So if the iPad has become, as you said last week, your 80% computer, this really is a consumption device, not a productivity device.
Exactly. And I find that, like this morning when I came down to check email, I headed for the Mac rather than the Nexus 7. And the reason for that is if I actually had to respond to an email, I wouldn't want to be doing it with the little keyboard on this thing.
But when you're using the iPad, what do you use in the morning to check email?
I would have the iPad all the time.
Okay, so clearly already you know the Nexus 7 is not going to replace the iPad, but neither would the iPad Mini if it actually shows up.
That's correct. It's not just an Android thing.
So would you even, at this point, we'll get back to the Nexus 7, would you get an iPad Mini if it comes out?
I'd like to say no, but
we know you.
Get things.
But we know you.
Yeah.
It's going to be like...
So I'd have to give it a try and confirm it.
It's going to be in the back room, who's getting it. It's going to be like me and me and me and me and me. But then the real challenge is who's keeping it.
And one thing I think that would make the decision for me is the camera.
So talk about that, because we were chatting about that the other day. I mean, as everybody knows, it's got a front-facing camera for video chat, but one of the places where ASUS and Google cut corners is they didn't put any camera, not even a bad camera. They put no camera at the back of this. And that's a big deal for you?
It is a big deal for me. What I found with the iPad 2 is I never use a camera.
Right, because it was garbage.
I really don't. Yeah. But then when I got this, I realized over the last few months that the iPad had become my number 2 camera. So I have my one on the phone, but then since I always have my iPad with me,
right,
I just take a lot of pictures.
And I think that's one of the things that actually is an important point to make, which is you and I are the type of people that we always have our iPads with us. It's very rare that I'll leave the house and not have the iPad. So I've always got 2 cameras now, my iPhone and my iPad, and they're both decent.
Yeah.
You know, last night I was taking pictures down on the dock, and I actually opened up this really cool app called You Gotta See This. And I was able to take some really neat panoramas. They weren't just straight panoramas. And I took the pictures with the iPad. I processed the pictures on the iPad. And I shared the pictures from one device at one time. And it's not just that this doesn't do that well, it won't do it.
Right.
So what have you liked about the device?
Well, I had done immediately a post on the gaming capabilities.
Right.
And that is kind of a huge thing because it gets at the processor speed and also the graphics power. This really, it's got a lot of power to it. And I think the focus that Asus had was on the screen, the graphics, and the processor. So I like gaming on it, and I like the fact that it is pretty fast.
I mean, I'm surprised at how every other Android device I've tried, I've seen lag, which really frustrated me. And I didn't find the screen, it wasn't just lag, the screen wasn't as responsive.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how to describe it because it's not just the lag, it's more than that. It's the accuracy, I guess. This thing, none of that. I mean, this thing flies. I mean, this thing flies.
And I think part of it is the operating system. You know, the newest Jelly Bean version here that has all of this stuff work towards the better tablet.
And they did a decent job. I mean, I'm impressed with the device. I mean, I told you and Judy and Carly last night that Alana had brought it up, and you said, you know, it's going to be shipped out on Monday and all, but that might be the case. But I have to tell you, I woke up this morning, and I did check email on it, and I've used the voice recognition, and Google has not only improved the operating system, but they've also improved the voice recognition that they're offering. It's actually really accurate. I found it very, very useful for returning emails. And then I sat and I just read for a while this morning, and it was very comfortable.
It is light.
One of my frustrations with the Kindle Touch is that it's super light, but it's laggy, and it, you know, yeah, I can read it outside. I can, you know, when I'm at the beach, I can read it at the beach, or I can stand in a pool when we're down in Aruba and read and not worry about losing it because it's so inexpensive. But this is, you know, under $200 also. You don't get the sunlight thing, but I mean, when you turn pages, it's instantaneous.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed is compared to the Kindle Fire, it's just a couple ounces lighter, but at this weight, it actually does make a difference.
I have to say though, I'm finding that holding a 7-inch tablet like this, when you hold it like this, it's a little top heavy. And I've got, you know, wrist issues to begin with because of the arthritis. It does bother me after a while. And it's funny because it's more comfortable to hold than the iPad, but the iPad, I don't hold at the bottom like this because of the size. Right. So I actually, after a period of time, actually have less discomfort holding the iPad than I do this. I mean, it's very, you know, it's an ergonomic thing, and I would have that probably with any tablet this size. But let's keep in mind, the iPad mini is not going to be this size if it comes out.
That's what they're saying, probably larger, a little bit bigger.
Right, and that makes a big difference every little bit. So what have you found that you really like beyond the screen and the processor, and what have you found that you really don't like besides and beyond the lack of a camera?
What I really like, I would say is the...
Okay, first of all, the fact that you have to hesitate for that long is not a ringing endorsement.
Oh, exactly, and I know that. The sound, there are probably more easy things to come up with that I don't like than what I do. You have a mono speaker that has kind of crappy sound. So what I do like the reading experience. I do like it as a video consumption thing. Francis did the post about how to get your Amazon video working on there. And it works pretty well.
Okay. If you're into that ecosystem.
Well, exactly, and that's the reason I like the Kindle Fire. I've got I've got a ton of stuff from Amazon.
Right. So for me, probably the biggest downside right now is what I keep coming back to. I forget about it. I get excited, and then I keep coming back to this. I'm so heavily invested in Apple's ecosystem for content that I miss it when I'm using this.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, I've got an Android phone, So therefore, I'm automatically partially Android. But whereas I may have a couple of hundred apps for this, I have a couple of thousand for the iPad.
Yeah, so do I. It's a little scary.
And there are entire categories that I'm missing. The music production is really a big one.
Right.
You know, with an iPad, I can hook in my guitar, keyboards, all this stuff. Can't do any of that here.
Right. Right. So it's a hard balance because you're not going to carry a phone, a 7-inch tablet, and a 9.7-inch tablet.
And that's a critical point. And that's why I was really glad you guys suggested that I try to only use this.
Oh, we were going to give you such a hard time if you didn't do that.
Yeah. But it's the only way to do it.
Right.
Because otherwise you easily crutch to the phone or the iPad, especially the iPad.
Right, right. So let's also talk about, you and I both have 64 gigabyte iPads, and I've got a 64 gigabyte iPad, and I've got it almost filled up. I mean, I've got stuff I could easily take off of it, but I've got a ton of content there. I bought the 8 gigabyte Nexus 7.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've got.
And
so, I mean, I've made an effort on my iPad to keep it a little bit less full. But I intentionally didn't look until this morning at how full this was.
And
I have less than a gigabyte left.
And as soon as it gets up close to the gig, it's going to act funky. Actually, that's an interesting competition. I'd like to see what happens when you do get it to max capacity.
Yeah.
Because,
that's something, if I had a camera on there, that would have been more full.
Right.
I haven't loaded any music yet or videos. It's just been streaming.
Right, right. I mean, what was nice for me is I was able to immediately get Spotify on it and also get the Squeezebox app on it. So when Alana and I were upstairs, I actually started something playing. She's like, "Why is there music coming from downstairs?" I'm like, "Because I just started the Squeezebox radio that's down there." So that is nice. I mean, the apps have really caught up on a lot of levels, not in some of the areas like music production that you use. But in other areas, everything I need to do I could have, but I'm going to hit capacity like that.
Yeah.
So here's the bottom line question. To paraphrase The Clash, actually to quote them, actually paraphrase.
Does it stay or does it go?
Does it stay or does it go?
That's still not decided yet.
All right.
But it's leaning in the go direction. Because the other thing I've thought about is what I really see this for is gaming.
Right.
But if I've got hundreds of more games on the iPad,
right?
If an iPad mini comes around for $250 or $300, wouldn't I be better served doing that?
So
now, speaking of $199, one thing we had talked about before is that I quickly jumped the price.
Yes, you did.
This from $199 to close to $300.
And how'd you do that?
I had to buy a keyboard.
Because you found the keyboard on it so lousy, unusable.
Yeah, it was unusably small. And so on my first full day, I watched my internet usage and my email on that just plummet. So I went out and grabbed a Logitech keyboard because unfortunately with the USB or the Bluetooth stack on this, it doesn't work with the Apple Bluetooth.
Don't you love that?
Grab one of those.
I mean,
that's why they call them standards.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. So you went out. So now your price is close to $300. And if you really were using it seriously as a productivity device, you'd max out the capacity. Also, it's going to be suddenly what should be a seamless experience is costing you more, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time managing it.
Exactly. And one thing I did find interesting about the capacity is that I have a lot more space left on my Kindle Fire than I do here.
Because?
And the reason for that is gaming. This is much more capable as a gaming device. And so I'm loading up big games on it.
Gotcha. Okay, so
I really wish this thing had a expandable storage.
Sure, but it does. I mean, it kicks the daylights out of the Kindle Fire.
It really does.
Okay. So I think I can pretty safely say that yours and Judy's and Carly's prediction about mine was pretty accurate. And
but at least you were pleasantly surprised.
It's a good tablet, especially at $199. At $199, It's a great beginner tablet. Asus and Google did a decent job here.
It really is the best Android tablet I think I've ever used.
There you go. That says it all. Cool. Well, for Gear Diary, this is Dan.
And this is Mike.
Thanks for watching. We'll be back.